Hello and welcome to the second of a two-part series on the Construction Record podcast focused on the upcoming Ontario election. I'm digital media editor Warren Fry. In the first part of our series, Daily Commercial News staff writer Angela Gismondi spoke to Richard Lyall, the president of the Residential Construction Council of Ontario, Eric Schmidt, the manager for public affairs and innovation at the Ontario General Contractors Association, and Karen Renkema-Millar, the Ontario vice president of the Progressive Contractors Association of Canada, about their election wish lists as the province goes to the polls on June 2nd. This week, Angela speaks to three new stakeholders, the first of which is Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario Executive Director Nadia Todorova.
I was wondering if you could kind of outline some of your priorities for, whichever party comes into power in June.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, one thing I would say is we're very encouraged that infrastructure has featured so prominently in the election campaign so far, and it seems like it will continue to be the case until June 2nd. From our perspective, this really reflects the importance that critical infrastructure plays in everyday lives of Ontarians. In terms of looking forward, what our CCO would like to see from the party that wins the upcoming election is that continued focus on critical infrastructure. And from our perspective, that is roads, bridges, water, wastewater, and housing. So the next government, the next party, they must focus on the fact that as the population of Ontario is projected to grow exponentially over the next 3 decades, it is essential that critical infrastructure is built to keep up with that growth. If you're looking at the GTA, that is one of the fastest regions in North America. It's expected to grow from 10 million people today to almost 15 million people by 2051, and that is only the GTA. So that sort of expected population growth is going to increase demand on our critical infrastructure from everything, on water, on wastewater, on housing, on transit, on highways, and on roads. And that is why the next government must focus on constructing additional infrastructure capacity. From our perspective, such as building Highway 413 and the Bradford bypass as a way to create that sort of additional mobility in the road system that is currently near or at capacity in the province. We have to focus on investing in critical infrastructure, both transportation and transit. This kind of dichotomy that's present right now is, you only have to invest in one or the other, and that kind of thinking is outdated. Ontario needs both in the form of integrated transportation planning, which from our perspective is really reflected in Highway 413. So Highway 413 includes both plans for a transitway, which is dedicated exclusively for public transit, so buses and LRTs, and also the highway, which will be completed with carpool infrastructure, electric vehicle charges, and other technology to enable automated vehicles. From our perspective, Ontario has grappled with growing pains in recent decades, and the ability to plan and build infrastructure has not always kept pace with the province's needs. And that's why when you're looking at infrastructure such as Highway 413 and the Bradford bypass are vital. The gridlock that the region experiences today already costs us $11 billion a year in lost productivity, and it really has real impacts on the quality of life for residents. So we like to see that sort of continued investment in building additional infrastructure, transit, and transportation. But another thing and this kind of goes into another priority that we have, is it's equally important to continue to focus on maintaining the current infrastructure that we have in a state of good repair. And here, one item that is of particular concern for us is that cities, especially those with large transit systems such as Toronto, they're experiencing significant budget shortfalls due to the low ridership as a result of the pandemic. Toronto's budget hole is over $800 million. So the next governing party must focus on ensuring that cities have that bridge funding required to get them through this transition period and prevent them from dipping into their capital budgets to address operating costs. And to avoid deferring or canceling of critical and necessary state of good repair projects. whatever party comes into power, they have to continue the previous collaborative efforts between the province, with the province and the federal government, which was reflected in the Safe Restart Agreement that took place in 2020 and 2021. And other funding programs to make sure that cities have the financial certainty and security to continue with their necessary capital infrastructure work. Because, without that additional assistance from these other two levels of government, cities will be forced to defer or cancel municipal infrastructure work because they can't run deficits in their budgets. And that deferring or canceling of work will result in construction jobs being lost. And essential and critical infrastructure falling into a state of disrepair, which will result in higher repair costs down the line. And it can also present dangers to public safety as well.
Next, Angela spoke with Ontario Building Trades business manager Marc Arsenault.
So what are some of the things that you're asking for?
Well, I think right out of the gate, Angela, the Provincial Building Construction Trade Council of Ontario partnered with the Construction Employers Coordinating Council of Ontario, that's our management partner, to develop a two-page document for the provincial parties on the construction industry priorities for 2022. So this is a labor management joint initiative that was presented to all four parties.
And what's included in that?
So we have two priorities that are listed, mainly for recognizing that the construction industry needs to prepare itself and plan ahead as a post-pandemic economic recovery strategy component. And so in our briefing paper to the provincial parties, we discuss how we could assist with providing a construction industry advisory panel to capture the civil and mechanical and electrical trades and their training capacity, the labor demand forecast, and assist with identifying bottlenecks and discussions on ways to relieve and mitigate those risks, and as well provide project stability. Construction contractor community and labor recognize that Infrastructure Ontario projects have a higher standard or need to be looked at as having a higher standard and leveraging those investments to maximize the return on breeding the next generation of skilled journey people. So assisting with our contractors and Infrastructure Ontario, where they have workforce development programs and apprenticeship plans in their procurement, we are working with our training centers, we're working with our provincial apprenticeship coordinators, and we're working with our contractors to maximize the return on those investments.
Was there anything else included in the document, or those the two big ones? Those
are the two big pieces. The process that's been the mechanism that the industry between the workforce providers and the employers has taken decades to get to the well-oiled machine that we have now. And preserving that model is something that's important to us, and it's important to our employers, because this is what works best. And it's, like I say, it's taken time to develop to where we are now. And that component there also includes self-vesting with specialized training for projects that are have unique and complex building processes, and as well ensuring that we are monitoring the health and safety component as to how it is that we perform that work. So those are dovetailed into the apprenticeship plan and the training and journey person upskilling component.
So some people are also talking about, they have some big asks and then they also have some smaller asks. Do you, maybe once the government gets into power, sort of the 100 days after, do you have anything like that you're going to be looking for, your members are going to be looking for?
We're positioning, and we have been, and we will continue to be positioning ourselves to ensure that we are meeting our expectation and responsibilities to deliver these projects on time, on budget, and safely. So it's not so much that we have an ask, it's an internal ask where inside the construction industry, we are information sharing to see where are we at with our capacity for recruiting new talent, where are we at with our capacity to ensure that we're staying on target with our retention and completion rates of our apprentices, and ensuring that we are maintaining a 95% completion rate, so that in fact we are breeding the province's next generation of skilled building trades journey people. So there's not necessarily an ask in with the government. The government continues to work well with our training centers to provide supplementary funding to ensure that equipment and consumables are in place, and our training centers, in partnership with our employers, are self-vested in the training. And so we see that the 2022-2023 annual IC purchase plans are in place. So our training centers are looking to see the construction schedules, work with our large consumers of construction services, and see where we need to add additional capacity to those annual IC purchase plans to meet the labor demand forecast.
Finally, Angela interviewed Ontario Sewer and Watermain Construction Association Executive Director Patrick McManus.
I think the most critical thing for us, I mean, really, there's two big pieces, at least in terms of election asks. The first one is, I think the most critical issue, anyways, is in our estimation is providing the help to municipalities to help them address their budgeting issues. I mean, COVID is continuing to wreak havoc on their municipal finances, especially in the larger cities that are running transit programs and shelters. And there really needs to be help, again, provided by the province as well as the federal government. And I mean, I think the problematic thing is that it's an unequal problem, because this is primarily something focused on the big cities. And cities they're having to find ways to deal with these costs that they don't have any way to recoup money from those costs. So what they tend to be doing is robbing their capital infrastructure programs, and I mean that's a big problem, because municipalities have their infrastructure has been in a state of disrepair for many years. I think a lot of municipalities in the province have done a good job in starting to catch up and address that infrastructure deficit over the last 7 years, and we really don't want to lose that momentum. And we also have entire sectors like ours, like sewer, water main, roads, transit, that are completely reliant on municipal infrastructure investments. So these are companies that have built their businesses around municipal capital planning and annual forecasts. So having the funding for this work just sort of disappear suddenly it causes a real problem for maintaining our workforce at a time when we need consistent consistent funding to maintain our workforce, to make sure that we're not sort of losing people to other sectors, because we're like every other sector, we're going through a really big skills crunch right now. So I think first and foremost, that's this municipal funding issue is the most critical issue that, regardless of who is elected, that we think needs to be addressed. And then the other item is obviously this ongoing issue with our transportation networks in the province, and in particular in the GTA. I mean, we've been very vocal in working alongside our partners with our CCAO on promoting the need for this Highway 413 and the Bradford bypass, because we need the new veins and arteries for growth in this region, and these investments are going to make sure that there's greater integration between the communities and the Golden Horseshoe, and it's going to relieve some of that congestion that's really stifling growth in the GTA. And it's the hallmark of a good investment when you're solving multiple problems with one project, and we really think that that's what both the 413 and the Bradford bypass does. And it's going to create a lot of jobs, and it's going to support long-term growth. And we think in many respects this election is a referendum on that issue of transportation construction, and we think it's just absolutely critically important to see those projects move forward, regardless of who's elected.
And for OSTA, I know you mentioned skilled trades already, but really that's centered around skilled trades and getting more training and apprenticeships and stuff like that going?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to sort of pinpoint the number, right? You hear anywhere from 75,000 to 125,000. So we'll say somewhere near 100,000 workers are going to retire in the industry in the next 7 years, and we're already dealing with this big skills gap. And this retirement wave is going to make things worse unless we keep up with this momentum that we've built on the skills gap. And I think in the last 4 years, we've made really good progress with the regulatory reforms that we've seen, but now we got to take those next steps. We think we need to focus on, pinpointing what are the in-demand trades, and in particular, we believe that we need to be promoting and training voluntary trades, and this is where we're seeing some of the most significant growth in need for the projects, especially for all the housing and civil construction work that's going on. And it's also representing some of the largest existing skills gaps. So that gap's going to grow unless we focus in particular on these voluntary trades and in those sectors. And then we also need to focus on reforming the immigration process, and in particular the Express Entry program. Now, some of that rests federally, but we're seeing growth in the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, and we think that the Ministry of Labour has done some really good work in that space in the last year, and we really, really want to see that continue forward and to see that program grow out over the next 4 years. To give us the opportunity here in Ontario to sort of pick and choose what it is that we need for skill sets in the province, because I think we have a much sort of clearer picture of where our investments are going and what we need here versus the federal government. So we would really like to see that program continue to grow and to sort of continue to help to identify where some of that critical need is.
Thanks for tuning in to our two-part election series, and make sure to listen Friday when we give our next day reactions to the election results. If you'd like to listen to other episodes of the Construction Record Podcast, you can hear us on Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Spotify, or on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening.